Hi guys, welcome to another video on the power of meaning. Today I'm going to be decoding the dragon and the famous line of Bruce Lee, "I do not hit, it hits all by itself," from Enter the Dragon. So there's this scene in Bruce Lee's classic martial arts masterpiece, Enter the Dragon, that was deleted from the final cut but was put back in when they released the later editions of the films, like the director's cut. In this scene is something that highlights something very important that most people miss when following the path laid out by Bruce Lee. Now, before we continue, guys, if you wouldn't mind hitting like, share, and subscribe, that way I can see if the content resonates with you and make more videos like this one. So, Bruce wasn't just a fighter. In fact, we know he did not compete in the fighting competitions of his day, since he wasn't really interested in point fighting or fighting with any rules for that matter. Although there are amazing tales of no rules fights that took place, as well as him sparring with world champions and showing them who was the big boss. Bruce's skill was exceptional. He went far beyond ordinary human limitations, not just of the body but of the mind. In order to transcend the mental and physical, he had to seek out the metaphysical. It is well known that Bruce majored in philosophy in university, and I believe even gave a few guest lectures on Taoism and perhaps Eastern philosophy there. The Tao of Jeet Kune Do, for example, contains many Zen passages collected by Bruce. The film Enter the Dragon contains many references to Zen. Consider the famous scene in which Bruce tells the young Lao, "Don't think, feel. It is like a finger pointing away to the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all of that heavenly glory." I mean, that's straight out of Zen Buddhism. Bruce was a philosopher. My argument is that this is what made him truly exceptional. Many have followed his footsteps, but without embodying Bruce's transcendent beingness, they fail to do anything other than go through the motions. It's like they've thrown away the nut and eaten the shell. This is because they are performing the techniques without Bruce's transcendental mindset. To me, Bruce embodied the Buddha in his martial arts. And by that I don't mean that he was a being of infinite compassion. So what do I mean by that? Well, the word Buddha is derived from the Hindu word buddhi, which means the intellectual faculty of the mind. For example, in Hindi, a buddhu is someone who functions beneath the intellectual faculty. An idiot. A Buddha, adding the da at the end of buddhi, is one who has transcended the intellectual faculty of the mind. He has gone beyond, transcended the intellect. Now let's get back to our scene. In the scene, a man who appears to be a Buddhist or Taoist monk walks with Bruce after he just armbarred the legendary Sammo Hung in the opening fight scene. The monk tells him, "I've seen your talents have gone beyond the mere physical level. Your skills are now at the point of spiritual insight. I have several questions. What is the highest technique you hope to achieve?" Bruce responds enigmatically, "To have no technique." "Very good," the monk says. "What are your thoughts when facing an opponent?" Bruce replies, "There is no opponent." "And why is that?" asks the monk. "Because the word I does not exist." The monk urges him to continue, and Bruce says, "A good martial artist does not become tense, but ready. Not thinking, yet not dreaming. Ready for whatever may come. When the opponent expands, I contract. And when he contracts, I expand. And when there is an opportunity, I do not hit. It hits all by itself." Now, most people, or at least a lot of people, take this to mean that Bruce is simply talking about muscle memory. And that's not a silly conclusion to make from that. I even held this view myself for quite a while. The idea that through repetition one can achieve such refined reactions that little to no thought is required and the unconscious just takes over the action for us. But I've come to realize that perhaps it's more than that. Bruce was talking about a metaphysical concept, not a psychobiological one. The first clue is that the context of the entire conversation is framed with the statement that Bruce's skills are not just physical anymore. They are at the point of spiritual insight, which is the first indication that we're not talking about muscle memory, So we're not talking about neurological habituation, we're talking about transcending the mind and body to the spiritual. There is an Ariadnean thread that runs through all of Eastern philosophy. We know Bruce was heavily influenced by Zen. Now, Zen is actually a derivation of the Chinese word Chan. Chan is a derivative of the Indian word dhyana. In dhyana, which is usually just clumsily labeled meditation in the West, we attempt to go beyond experience to the level of ultimate reality, and we are lost in that reality. It's not a relative reality, but an absolute one. There are no words to describe it, since it's an experience beyond the mind. Hence, it is said in the ancient texts of Asia, "He who knows does not talk." This is why Bruce says the word I does not exist. It doesn't in the ultimate reality. So how does this pertain to the notion of I do not hit, it hits all by itself? The best way I can see of describing it comes from the commentary on the Bhagavad Gita by Sri Aurobindo. Now, it's very difficult to understand or even believe in this ultimate reality if your mind has been heavily filled with Western thought and religious concepts, or atheism. Although there are Western and Christian esoteric counterparts that describe exactly this type of divine cosmology, just using a different vocabulary. Aurobindo tells us that the universe comes from the unmanifest Purusha. Purusha is the uncaused and unchanging. It is absolute, independent, free, imperceptible, unknowable through other agencies, above any experience by mind or senses, and beyond any words or explanations. Purusha gives rise to Prakriti or nature, the manifest physical universe. The universe in Hindu cosmology is composed of three modes of nature: tamas, rajas, and sattva, inert matter, energy, and mind, respectively. The Gita tells us that the ego itself is an illusion, created by the three modes of nature. The physical body and the energy and vitality that keeps it going, and the structure of the brain, including the ego complex, which all human beings have, and is a latent structure waiting to be fleshed out in the brain and the psyche by individual experience. According to Aurobindo, and I quote, Purusha is the soul, not in the ordinary or popular sense of the word, but of pure conscious being, immobile, immutable, and self-luminous. Prakriti, nature, is energy and its process. Purusha, the unmanifest, does nothing, but it reflects the action of energy and its processes. Prakriti or nature is mechanical, but by being reflected in Purusha, it assumes the appearance of consciousness. So what Aurobindo is telling us there is that consciousness is created by the manifest nature reflecting in the void of the unmanifest. And this is the Hindu answer to the hard problem of consciousness, and I think it's quite ingenious. This is described further by Aurobindo in his commentary. He tells us that there are two Purushas, the part of the unmanifest that is reflecting the modes of nature and a deeper part untouched by nature. It's often described using the image of two birds in a tree, eternally yoked companions. One enjoys the fruit of the tree, the other, according to Aurobindo, is an eternally silent, unbound self by whom all of this physical universe is extended, but is aloof from it. The Gita in the second chapter makes a pertinent note here, and you have to remember that all of the Eastern philosophies come originally from the perennial Hindu teachings. Quote, "Who abandons all desires and lives and acts free from longing, who has no I or mine, who has extinguished the individual ego, he attains to great peace." Consider again Bruce's words, because the word I does not exist. The first line of chapter 3 of the Gita says, "While the actions are being entirely done by the modes of nature, he whose self is bewildered by egoism thinks that it is his I which is doing them." Interesting, isn't it? And here's the important part, to quote Sri Aurobindo. Here there is the clear distinction between the two levels of consciousness, two standpoints of action. That of the soul caught in the web of its egoistic nature and doing works with the idea but not the reality of free will, under the impulsion of nature, and that of the soul delivered from its identification with the ego, observing, sanctioning, and governing the works of nature from above her. We speak of the soul being subject to nature, but on the other hand, the Gita, in distinguishing the properties of the soul and nature, affirms that while nature is the executrix, the soul is always the Lord. It speaks here of the self being bewildered by egoism, but the real self, to the Vedantin, is the divine, eternally free and self-aware. What then is this self that is bewildered by nature, this soul that is subject to her? The answer is that we are speaking here in the common parlance of our lower or mental view of things. We are speaking of the apparent self, of the apparent soul, not of the real self, not of the true Purusha. It is really the ego which is subject to nature, inevitably, because it is itself a part of nature, one functioning of her machinery. But when the self-awareness in the mind consciousness identifies itself with the ego, it creates the appearance of a lower self, an ego self. And so too, what we think of ordinarily as the soul is really the natural personality, not the true person, the Purusha, but the desire soul in us, which is a reflection of the consciousness of the Purusha in the workings of Prakriti, or nature. It is, in fact, itself only an action of the three modes and therefore a part of nature. So he's saying the ego is a part of nature. Thus, there are, we may say, two souls in us. The apparent or desire soul, which changes with the mutations of the gunas, the three modes of nature, and is entirely constituted and determined by them, and the free and eternal Purusha, not limited by nature and her modes. We have two selves, the apparent self, which is only the ego, that mental center in us, which takes up this mutable action of Prakriti, this mutable personality, in which says, I am this personality, I am this natural being who am doing these works. But the natural being is simply nature, a composite of the modes of nature, and the true self, which is indeed the upholder, the possessor and the lord of nature, and figured in her, but is not itself the mutable natural personality. The way to be free must then be to get rid of the desires of this desire soul and the false self view of this ego. And to quote the Gita, having become free from desire and egoism, cries the teacher, fight with all the fever of thy soul passed away from thee. And I think that last line is very significant. One of the things that I love about the Gita is that it's set during a great battle. And I think, just like Bruce did, that it's no wonder that martial arts, which involves putting ourselves in confrontation with the possibility and reality of death, as such, provides a drive towards self-examination that ultimately leads to understanding these transcendental concepts. And that's why I think martial arts functions as a gateway ultimately to an enlightened state. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please hit the comment section to tell me what you thought, if you agreed or disagreed. And please hit like, share and subscribe for more content. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.